Hello, everybody. How you doing? It is 2 o'clock. We are ready to get going. We see a lot of people joining in. Welcome again to Champions Big Fix webinar series. In this case, we have episode 3 of 5, leveraging your source of truth. And with us today is Frank. There we go. Myself, Dan Powers, and as ever present, Kathy Wynn from HLC. But the real folks or stars today are going to be Dr. Drew and Frank Hansen. As we promised, we will get out of the PowerPoint slides we did in the last 2 webinars, and we'll get into some interactive stuff in the Big Fix console and ServiceNow. So while we walk through this, just to show you what we did last week, if you want to fast forward there, Frank, in the previous weeks of this series, we did why we were excited that HCL took over Endpoint Big Fix management, and that's where Kathy was gracious enough to join us for this web series with us. And the week after that, we did the 5 reasons why you need the Hero application, still in beta mode. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but we are getting the people that asked for that beta. We sent that email out to them as we're organizing that, Tammy.
We did, and if there's anybody else out there that wants to get into the beta, they can contact us through the question part of this app.
Okay, and on that note, thank you, Tammy. I should tell people we are recording this. We do record all the webinars. We will put this up on the Champion website for you to look at this one or any of our previous ones. And also, if you have questions, I know you're in muted mode. If you have questions as we go through this, you can type them in. And we have folks looking at the questions that we feel that we should answer the question while we're giving the demo, we will. Otherwise, we'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end of this. Future weeks coming up that'll complete this series is Big Fix Patching Simply Best Practices on November 7th. And then following that, the last one of this series, we're going to do monitoring best practices. Clients always ask us this. To me, Big Fix wants you to start using it for your patching, inventory, asset management, software distribution. It is an enterprise application. And on that note, you should have some monitoring of the Big Fix system, the relays, all the functions of it to make sure if you notice there's any issues before they become major problems. So we're going to kind of walk over that in the last series there. So as I had mentioned, we're going to try to get into the console right away, but I got 2 more slides just because in our previous patch management series, we talked about how to leverage some custom client settings that we've done for a lot of our clients. So we know other people have utilized it to create a predictable patching schedule. So for an example, what we did is base it off Patch Tuesday. And you can hit forward there. There you go. So which is a second Tuesday of every month. So something we can easily compute. And then from there, what we end up doing is creating patch groups. Now, very easily, the first one I just labeled Group A, could be your test systems. But basically, this starts the day after Patch Tuesday is released, and it runs for an entire week up to the next Tuesday. And then from there, we can get into our next groupings, which would be Group B, Group C, and Group D. And again, I left these simple back when we did that webinar. It's Group A, B, C, and D. You could, again, call these test systems, QA systems. Once you've done your test, you got your QA out of the way, you might have changed your baselines a little bit. That's when you can really be really comfortable in patching your production systems. And that 4th group, just because it fits in the days of the month, could be those really sensitive systems, whether that's high-level managers, CEOs, or your biggest online systems in your environment. So that's kind of how we set it up. The whole purpose of that was that we were letting endpoints determine what group they were in, what day of the week, are you allowed to reboot it, all of these cool things, so that you could limit the amount of baselines you were running and how many actions you were running, and systems would only patch during their patch window, meaning their patch group, their week, their day, and their time. So if we fast forward on the next slide, and again, this is just part of that review, we had all of those groups laid out for us, and these were client settings that we put on the computers themselves in BigFix. And the last piece is what we ran this out, if you hit forward there, Frank, is we ran this out of an Excel file. This was our source of truth. And again, simple listing of the host name, which patch group they were in, which day of the week, the start time, end time, can we reboot this box? It made creating our baselines and running patching much smoother, and helped us limit the amount of baselines and actions we ran at any time. Now with this, good solution, it works, but of course, running this from an Excel file really wasn't the best thing. It wasn't the best source of truth. So we thought of a great way today. And again, we're sticking with our 30 minutes, as everybody seemed to like. So it's not an hour of your time. And Frank and Dr. Drew are going to show us how to do this in ServiceNow, and also show us a couple other things with our eBridge scoped application inside of ServiceNow. And BigFix, which talks over eBridge into ServiceNow, is one connector, if you will. We call it a girder, but is that integration between BigFix and ServiceNow. So with that, Frank and Drew, please take it away.
All right. So the first thing I want to highlight is with ServiceNow and the New York release, there's some things related to the CMDB that are very important as you bring in any CMDB discovery related data. New York requires you to adhere to the identification and reconciliation process. Now this slide is a little bit, probably hard to read in a small screen. The long and the short of it is we've incorporated the process that will allow for correct, complete, and compliant data to come into the CMDB. So I just wanted to bring that up because that was something that we didn't really talk about in the last side of things. And I'll go a little bit more into that once we go into the demo. All right, so let's go ahead and start here, and let me bring this up. So what we're looking at is our vendor instance of ServiceNow, and we've converted from layouts to using ServiceNow dashboards. And from our previous webinar, we went through some of the process that we utilized to bring in the data. And on the BigFix side in ServiceNow, we were ingesting everything from sites to fixlets, tasks, baselines, users, and groups. And we're bringing that into ServiceNow's ecosystem. And we're then using ServiceNow's flow and action designer to incorporate a lot of the manual processes that used to have to take place before. So we tried to mimic this screen very similar to the web UI.
Yeah, and one thing about that, interestingly enough, Dan came back from one of the BigFix user groups with some feedback about that. Could we get the look and feel of web UI in ServiceNow? And and I think with this and building this out, we accomplished that. But the other thing, Frank, please scroll up real quick. If you notice, we have one other piece of data that you wouldn't have in there, and that BigFix agent needed on all the way to the right. And what we're able to do with that, and where we're pulling that from, is actually within the ServiceNow CMDB. So if you can imagine, you could build out, a BigFix dashboard with, combining different metrics from different areas within ServiceNow. Being able to compare some of that, compliance data between the engine in ServiceNow and also what you're getting back with BigFix data as well.
So I'm gonna walk through a few of the more interesting things that we're doing, and then how we're creating a dynamic baseline solution that can then take you end to end. So we built the ability to go grab all the data from BigFix. So on Patch Tuesday, we go out, we pull all of the patches across. Then we create a dynamic baseline based off of some criteria, which I'll show you here in a second. And then we give the user the ability to go and push it and execute the baseline down on BigFix itself. I'm going to walk through just a couple of the tabs, and then I'll go into the service request system and show you the end-to-end. But just from a data perspective, over on the left navigation side, you can, if you look through, we have patches, fixlets, and tasks. Baselines, we cover everything from properties, components, computers, and actions. Computers, we have everything from the computer settings to the properties and groups. And then we started on the process of gathering the BFI inventory, which will be in our next release. So let me just hit on a couple of these things. I'll just go into baselines. And again, this data within ServiceNow is really, once you have the data brought in, you can slice and dice this any way you want, and you can create a series of reports that show just about anything. This is just a simple example of bringing in some baseline data, and I'm sorting it based on property type. You can create, again, reports any way you feel necessary in your environment. Same thing with sites. Again, just bringing up some data. But what's more applicable to what we're talking about today is on the maintenance side of things and how it relates to doing baseline patching. Now, Dan had shown some of the fields that we expect on the computer setting side of things. We're pulling all that field data in. You'll probably notice this is a group C. It's a work or a weekday of Sunday. There's a start and end time, and whether or not you want the machine to be able to be rebooted or not. We also have, and I'll go into a little bit more of this on how the flow side of things work with this. But then in addition to that, we gather information related to the computer. So if you want to drill into the individual computer, and if you're interested, based on group, I can drill all the way in to the individual computer. And once I'm in at the CMDB level, now I see all of the properties. So any property in specific things related to maintenance or things related to reboot that tie into our best practices for patching. But in addition to that, we get everything else. All the relationships are tied in for core properties. If there's any groups, they're tied into the groups. Any baselines this computer might be part of. And then any incidents that particular computer may have caused or have received from either BigFix or another computer. There's also what is the applicable patches for this given computer. So those are a few things as you drill into the actual agent that you're able to see. Let's go back and I just want to hit one more thing here on the ROI side.
Yeah, so the ROI piece, basically what we built out there was we assigned metrics to each of the actions that we're able to perform in ServiceNow through our service catalog. So for example, just through some, whether that's changing a computer setting, initiating and kicking off a baseline, we were assigning a metric and along with a dollar amount of the estimated time savings between jumping in between ServiceNow and BigFix in this example. And then basically we can calculate all of those actions performed over the course of time. And this is actually a running total. As the client uses the eBridge application, you can see exactly what their return on their investment is based on the time saved from jumping in between.
Hey, Drew, I got a quick question for you. So I know we put some basic stuff in there, but this is configurable, right, at the end side. Like if you had level 1, 2, 3 as an example, right, and you put a dollar amount in and said, hey, these mundane tasks, a level 1 engineer could do it, but hey, packaging a piece of software or whatever that you would do in BigFix, we can assign it a different level. Is that customizable?
Yeah, exactly. So as part of our stand-up and working with the client when we're configuring eBridge, we would basically, as part of our setup process, put some of those metrics in place, from a dollar amount standpoint. I mean, the time amount, we think we have pretty well nailed down, but obviously that dollar amount could fluctuate depending on the organization, and we can configure either one as we move forward with the implementation.
Okay, that's cool. And this is Dan again speaking. A lot of our clients looking at everybody's trying to do automation, regardless of how they're doing it, but being able to track that ROI, right, can be difficult. So it's kind of cool to see it in there.
All right, so let's get into some of the bidirectional nature of what we've done with eBridge and BigFix. So again, having full REST capability on the BigFix side gives us the ability to do quite a bit of stuff. And what we try to do is think about what are the things that the level 1 and level 2 person would do, and then we still need a level 3 person to do the really heavy lifting side of things and build stuff on the BigFix side. But we've abstracted out the capability so that if you're not a BigFix savvy person, but you need to provide patching, we give you that ability from within ServiceNow. Now, granted, you have to have an appropriate ServiceNow role, and then you have to be part of the group, but that's all part of the onboarding process. So I'm going to walk through a couple of examples of what we do with that. Now, the first piece is this patch processing part, and this was something that Dan had brought up. We want to be able to say, for any organization, we want to apply this across the board. So we have a service catalog entry that will let them come in and put in a patch group, select a patch day, start and end time, and then whether or not you want to reboot or not. That will then do a down call and update the computer settings on any of the endpoints that have a BigFix agent. Now, in addition to that, we also have our BigFix baseline requests. And this allows us to create a baseline on the fly. So we can do a simple baseline. We got to pick a site. So I'm going to go after our development site. This category we use from a filtering standpoint, but you can put anything in there. Same thing with description. We pick a group, and then let's pick a set of patches there. All right, so now I just created a service request item. Now, depending on who my user is, and if I have the appropriate roles, I'll get this create baseline button. Now, this correlation ID will be populated once the REST call completes and it gets the ID, the baseline ID from BigFix. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And here in a second, you'll see a couple things happen. And right now it's doing the back-end, authentication, doing the REST service, and creating the baseline down on BigFix. And then once that's complete here, it'll populate with our correlation ID. There we go. So we got a correlation ID now. And so now I can say, in normal BigFix operations, let's say someone makes a change to one of the fixlets and the fixlet is now out of sync with the baseline. We've added a sync baseline button here. We've also added this update related lists. So as the computers become relevant, you'll see the computers, we update the related list and the computers will show up here. Right now it's empty because it just went down there and the BigFix baseline's created, but nothing has been applicable yet. After that, we can go and execute the baseline. So we can run this and it will execute just as it would if you were in BigFix itself. If you're done, then we can go ahead and click delete here and you can remove the baseline from BigFix. It will mark it as removed in ServiceNow. It will keep a footprint of it, but then it will go and remove that from BigFix itself. So that's how we create baselines in ServiceNow. Now there's another piece of this that as you move into more of the integration hub and the flow capability, this is going to become really important in how you instrument ServiceNow and BigFix together. So I'm going to walk you through our dynamic baseline flow, which has a combination of flows and actions. And this is really the going forward methodology that ServiceNow expects you to use. So we've already incorporated our process in there. And it's really simple. This we're running, our trigger is weekly, so we probably need to have it every 2 weeks on Wednesday so we can pick up the patch Tuesday data that comes in. We do a lookup and we basically say in our lookup, the release date is at or after, I put in 120 days, but you can put in 7 days. And then the severity is not empty. You can put in whatever, if you're only going after like severity critical, I just wanted to illustrate that you can add many other things to your flow here to say, if I create a dynamic baseline, I want it to be these conditions. And basically, if you look through, it can be based on the categories, CVE, it can be based off of keywords, release date, all of this stuff, and we can create a trigger in flow that fires based on those conditions. And then what happens is first thing we do is we have a glue table that we want to clean up. So this action deletes all old baselines. And if we go over to our actions and we just bring up these couple of things here. So I'm going to bring up our 2 actions. So there's our create. And then let's go grab our delete old baselines. And what this does is first it monitors for a given record to be created, and then it runs a delete action against the table that we specified in the create. So what happens then is first the initial dynamic baseline table in ServiceNow is cleaned up, and then we populate it. And we're populating it with 3 things, the release date, the name, and then the correlation ID, which is the actual fixlet ID that lives inside of BigFix. And if we come over into our navigation then, come into BigFix, and we look at our dynamic baselines, we can see we have baseline, or I'm sorry, we have fixlet ID, the name, and the release date. And from there now we can, again, I only added, the date, but you could add any other field that exists within the fixlet itself to help construct your dynamic baseline. And that's how we were able to accomplish building the dynamic baselines in ServiceNow. Hold on, let me go back here.
Frank, I'll interject real quick with a question we have. So we had somebody ask if they want to modify a workflow like what you just went through. Can we do that as a customer? And absolutely, the answer is yes. If you're a system administrator or have the flow designer role within your organization, you could configure and customize any workflow as you wish. With the girder, we have some pre-built workflows, not only for the data loading, but also for some on the process side of things. So the approval process. Or let's say, take that one step further and you have a change approval board at your organization. We have some of those out of the box workflows pre-built that we can implement if it aligns with your business process. But yeah, good question. And yeah, the answer is absolutely you can modify those.
Nice. Okay, so we went through how we created using our service catalog entry, how you create a dynamic baseline, how you update a grouping of computer settings. If there's just one setting that you might want to change, you can come into our service catalog entry, pick a computer. Let's just see, I always like AD01. Nope. And then let's say we want to update an existing settings. We just search for what settings exist here. So if we look for, let's say I want to change reboot from no to yes. Oop, there we go. So I'm going to change this now and say, yes, we want to allow when our patch window fires, we want this computer now to be set to reboot. And same thing happens is we have on the back end, we have if your user has the appropriate roles, you'll get these two UI buttons. So request approval or cancel request. If not, and your user is, you put it through the notification process, this will be sent to whoever is in the associated group, and then they can go through the normal approval process. So for example, if you come up and impersonate a user, and we look here, let me leave the page. Now I'm logging in as a different user who should have a set of requests. So if I come to my requests, right here, or approval, sorry, it's approvals, not a request. My approvals, there we go. So now we can see I have two requests here that need to be fulfilled. And now as an end user, if I have the appropriate rights, I can come in and I can request, or I can click on approve, and the same action that if I come back into sysadmin that we were firing off in our approval process occurs in the workflow. Now, benefit of that obviously is that, in the workflow, we can add a bunch of additional components. In the UI button, we're basically saying, go and run this now, execute this command now.
So Frank, can I interject? So basically at the end of the day, what you're doing is marrying BigFix, right? So you walk through and showed how you build a flow, right? So, but at the end of the day, once that's there, it really would be, hey, this is going to happen automatically via trigger. It's going to create this set of baselines based on the last 7 day after patch Tuesday of patches, targeting these machines, and it puts it in ServiceNow's work queue, which could be, okay, this doesn't just fire. I may need, a high-level person to approve it, or it may have to go through multiple approval processes. And once it's done, it then automatically fires back into BigFix, creates that baseline, and executes it, correct?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, so Frank was going into details. That's a lot of that is he's showing you how you design this and set it up. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is, automate the mundane at the end of the day, right? Because I've done it, people on the phone, you grab BigFix, you make a report after patch Tuesday, you grab the patches, what are the computers on it, you take that data, you put it into your ticket system, in this case ServiceNow, you make a request, hey, I want to patch these boxes, you go through the CAB meetings, you get approved, you get the approval, you go back to BigFix. So what Frank showed you is all of that can be automated, right, at the end of the day, and that's what we're trying to do, and that's where that return on investment comes from.
Okay, so that's what we wanted to show you. We'll open it up to questions now.
I think we have another one that just popped up about the request that comes into patch. Question is, when a new server or set of servers come online, you would use the request that you showed to set the patch windows on the client?
You could absolutely do that. So let's say you wanted to, as a new endpoint is a new agent's installed, our process will pick that agent up. Once the agent shows up, we'll see it on the CMDB. So for example, here's our CMDB. If you want to then populate the maintenance requests, then you can go ahead and go through that service request process I was just showing you. And you can change all 4 of the settings. You can change any computer setting for that matter on the endpoint.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. At a previous company I worked for, I can't say the name, but that's exactly what would happen. So if you came in as an application owner and you were bringing online a new application, it had to be onboarded, meaning, hey, the CMDB knew it was there. It was in what they call the staging mode or dev mode, if you will. To make that a production system that passed the knock and the SOC, it had to go through that onboarding process. And part of that was, what is the patching? Do you have a run book for it? All of these things. So I think that's where that, in my mind, that's what that question was about is, okay, we're onboarding a system, just like onboarding a new hire user. Hey, what department is he in? What group roles does he get? You have to fill all this out before that account gets created. So that's an excellent question in my mind, because part of that should be, hey, the patch guy is not going to do this. It's the people onboarding this that are going to take care of it, right?
Yep, so I wanted to kind of close with just a couple of things. So we're listing here the app in the ServiceNow App Store. So if you go to the App Store and you just search for eBridge, you'll see right now we have, Champion has 4 apps certified in the App Store. We have 2 more coming. Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud will be the next one. The process to get the app certified is pretty rigorous. So it's important, if you're going to do integration, especially to maintain like your licensing and your costs within ServiceNow, as it relates to orchestration and discovery, it's important to be aware of just customizing apps yourself versus an app from the store, because there are different costs associated with it. So we want to make sure we at least, put a plug in here for the App Store. You can go and search and find our app in there, and you can click on the BigFix app and do a trial. There's a button in the App Store to do a 30-day trial. Configuration is about 4 or 5 steps of setup, and as long as you have a mid server that can talk to your BigFix server, you're good to go.
Hey, Frank, I got another question for you, and this is me saying it, but just because doing a lot of BigFix implementations, the one screen where you showed, the agents that need BigFix on it, so I'm assuming some of that data came out of these other girders, right? Whether it was core or straight out of Active Directory. Because the question I always get, and I'm sure you did too. Hey, we install BigFix, we get it up and running, and the client comes to us and says, hey, do we get the agent installed everywhere? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know your environment, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Dan. The answer to that is that we're pulling the data directly from the CMDB. So we build the CMDB with our discovery, and then we enhance it with other girders. So if you have, let's say you just used ServiceNow's discovery, we could piggyback on top of that. But let's say you decided you didn't want to use that, and you used our girders, our core or Active Directory girder would be populated with that data. So then now we know what applications are running on that box, what applications have, the BES client running, which ones don't.
And I don't mean to step on your, but I think that's important, right? For people to realize there is the more data we get and we can correlate it over eBridge and normalize it, it just becomes incredibly more and more useful in ways we never even thought of.
Yep, so another little point here is, so this is a computer, it's a Linux computer in our environment that we found that didn't have an agent. In this case where you don't have an agent, 2 things pop up here, 2 UI buttons, a install and a fetch settings. And that, if you find computers that don't have an agent, or if you want to go and see what the current settings are on one that you just deployed an agent, we added the ability to go and pull that data directly.
That's actually really cool, because then you're ensuring that your BigFix is working everywhere at the end of the day on all your agents deployed. So that was always an issue that I've had at clients as well. And lastly, just because I saw it, and I know we have a minute or 2 left, and there's probably some more questions, but Frank, can you scroll down here? I like the bottom of this that you did. So we always get that question, or I've had it many, many times being at a client site, we're sitting with the admins, and of course, the security guys are on the other side of the table and they're running Rapid7, whatever they're doing. And they're talking CVS scoring and CVEs. And now, for those out there on the call, love Leeway's report. but I love how you guys grabbed the CVE information here and showed it to us. To my opinion, it lets people talk apples to apples. So, and you could even drill into there and see who's applicable to those things and what fixlets they go to. Yes.
Yep, you can. So if I drill in here, now I get the list of CVEs. As I drill into the individual patch, now I see the computers that need that. I can even tell you the actions that are applied in that fixlet if you want to see what those are.
That's actually really cool. So again, correlating the data is the whole point of this. And again, for folks, we got to ask this question. We're not trying to replicate, we try to make the look and feel because customers asked us to. We're not trying to replace web UI. We're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is give people that capability to do bidirectional communication with BigFix. And again, automate the mundane. And a perfect example of that to me was when you go to do a patch and I got to run a report and export it to a CVE, load this up to my ticketing system as a request, go to the CAB meetings. Those are the things we're trying to automate. And any other settings like, hey, install the BigFix agent, it's not out there, that we could push to level 1 support help desk and things, and even deploying software. That's what we're trying to do here, is automate that mundane and be able to keep track of it in a change management system, which is what ServiceNow is.
We got a question, Dan?
Yeah. Is it possible or reasonably easy to use this to have data in the CMDB drive patching with automation plans in BigFix for the app that have clusters and or other more complex requirements for the servers?
Yeah, so on the policy side of things, it's absolutely possible. Right now we're only pulling the data that's available in the REST API from a speed perspective, but we're also pulling data from the actual database itself. So anything that might not be exposed from like the policy standpoint, I'm assuming we could get it. Now we don't have that set up today in this, but again, that's a great request, and that's something my team can go off and we'll research it and build that piece of it into it. So that's a great question.
Hey, and follow up on that note, Frank, currently everything you showed there was basic BigFix, right? And it could be just with patch. We're not talking, inventory and all these other things. I know you guys are working on BFI to integrate that data, but what I found interesting, because of the core girder, you can drill into a BigFix agent and you could even tell me what software is running on it because you're discovering it with the core side of the house. But to folks' note out there, BFI, automation, some of those other things that have their own REST API, Frank and his team are working at getting that information into the BigFix girder as well. Currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, everything you kind of showed there, anybody with just patching as far as a license code would get everything that you've shown.
That's correct. The next piece we're working on is tying in BFI into SAM within ServiceNow.
I know there was a lot of requests for that. Actually, we're up at the and again, if folks want to look at it, I think there's one more slide, Frank. Oh, you have it. We did hit the 2:33 mark. If there's any other questions, I know Drew and Tammy were trying to answer some just in the chat windows. If there's any other questions, people want to reach out to us and get a demo, look a little bit deeper, ask some more questions. Remember, we had the 30 minutes. We couldn't go into everything. We were hoping to hit the mark and tie it in with the whole patching thing we've been talking about. But again, we're keeping these limited to the 30 minutes so we don't take an hour of people's time. And Tammy or Drew, unless there's other questions, we can hang here for a minute. But I think we showed what we wanted to do and slightly over the marker, but that's okay.
Yeah, we don't have any other questions, but we will stay on for a moment. But I think people that I was going back and forth with, if you just want to do a 30-day trial, we're showing how you can go click on the eBridge BigFix girder and you can start the 30-day trial. So, but we will wrap up, but we won't close this in case there's a few more questions that come in late.
And I appreciate everybody for showing up. So again, thank you for joining our series. We do have the next one that'll be coming up. You can always check www.championsg.com/events and to make sure you register for more upcoming ones. And if you have any suggestions or something you want to see different, please let us know. We love that feedback. We want to make sure these are useful to everybody, and we will drive it to what most people want to talk about. So again, thank you for your time.
One last thing, sorry. I have up on the screen where you can come and select the trial. You'll notice it's compatibility with New York and backwards compatible to Kingston. So that's just an FYI.
Thank you, Frank, for assisting on today's webinar, and Dr. Drew.
You're welcome.
Thank you.